Welcome to North Dakota Legislative Review. I'm Matt O'Lean, sitting in for Dave Thompson this week, and my guest is Representative Jeremy Olson, Republican from Arnegard. Thanks, Jeremy, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, and very honored to be asked as a freshman to join you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. This should be a great conversation. First off, I'd just like to ask your background and where you're from originally, and kind of what your regular career was or is outside of the state legislature.
Well, I grew up in western North Dakota, Watford City, Arnegard area. Our family farms in that area. Graduated from Watford City. I was very fortunate. I got an appointment to attend West Point to become an Army officer. So I was able to serve my country as an Army officer for several years, and eventually got out and different jobs throughout the years. Eventually, as my dad says, the prodigal son finally made his way back. Back in 2011, we made our way back to western North Dakota with the energy boom, and it was great because a lot of people I graduated high school with ended up leaving the state, but then the energy boom brought us back. Had good jobs, good paying jobs, good opportunities, good place to raise our children, and that allowed us to come back here. And I've been working in the energy industry ever since coming back.
Where'd you serve in the Army?
I served initially in Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I deployed over to Kosovo in 1999 and 2000, and then ended up leaving medical discharge in end of 2002. So
you're a freshman legislator. Give me your perspective on how it's been, learning curves, that kind of thing.
Well, the learning curve is really high, I guess, but I got to say I've been very fortunate. We had a lot of good mentors, good mentorship. Even before the elections happened, we had the Rich Wardners, the Mike LaFours, putting on education stuff for us, in the summer and the fall leading up to it. So, yes, there's a lot of information, a lot to take in. But by the time we got in December, it wasn't new. It was a lot, but it was a review of stuff that they had to help prepare us for before, because we had such a large freshman group. It's not, you can't go business as usual. You have to develop a good mentorship, a good training program, and I was linked up with a great mentor, Representative Pyle, and I've been very fortunate.
So what are the days like for you? What's a typical Jeremy Olson day?
Well, get up, try to do some exercise with one of my colleagues. He's one of those guys that if I don't show up in the gym, I'm going to hear about it. So it's a good accountability partner there. And then get in early, and committee meetings. Going through a lot of different, whether it's A or B committee, going through a lot of information, and then the hearings. And now that we're had crossover, it's a little bit of a different pace. It's kind of a hurry up and wait, and then really work hard, really quick when you're on committees. So that's a different. The last couple of weeks have been has been a very different pace than the first 60 or so days.
Because we're nearing the end.
Because we're nearing the end, yeah.
Right. You represent western North Dakota. What are some key issues that you've addressed or want to see addressed, or maybe even still need to get addressed for your section of the state?
So, fortunately, I was able to get into two great committees that are beneficial for western North Dakota: Energy and Natural Resources and Finance and Tax. And in both committees, we have a lot of went through a lot of bills that had some very positive impacts on the western counties and energy country. As the Bakken matures, as it's been there, we've been in it for greater than 10 years now. We're entering a different phase, and it's not the rush, it's not the boom it used to be, but we're still growing, but we still need to sustain growth. But now we're competing with Texas, and we're competing with New Mexico for resources, for investment dollars. So some of the bills that came through helped to attract, are meant to help attract business, help to attract capital investment into western North Dakota for the energy. And those are the bills that I put a lot of energy in, not just to help bring in investment into the drilling and the completions and the production, but The bills that I've been focusing on are things that we're not going to see the benefit for maybe 10, 15 years from now. As the Bakken ages, we're going to go from a primary recovery to a secondary recovery. And there's a lot more oil in there that we're just not able to get with today's technology.
Okay.
We're going to have to go to a different phase of recycling of secondary recovery,
recovery,
either through carbon, natural gas, or other means of doing that. So, putting the policies in place now to allow the infrastructure to be placed over the next decade or so is very far-reaching. It's very forward-looking, but it's stuff that when you plant a tree, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time to do it? Today. So we're thinking things that we need to do 15, 20 years from now. We're planting the tree, the seedling right now.
And what are a couple of these very specific bills that you think will attract people? Are they taxation, or what are the specifics of those bills that would attract or address these issues?
One of the bills, it will give a tax break for re-stimulation. So you have some of these older wells that are just not perfect. As a well ages, its production declines, and there's a point where you can do a re-stimulation or a refracture and bring more life into it, bring more production to it. One of the bills would allow a tax break for the production. For that new production that's brought on. Basically, it's incentivizing a company to go in and re-stimulate a well and bring more production. They'll basically give you a break on some of that new production up to a certain amount of time, up to a certain number of barrels. Again, it's a win-win, but it gives oil and gas companies a incentive to do that. Other ones are helping to get a more consistency on their extraction taxes and royalty taxes. We took off the 1% pop that came up this summer.
Okay.
That I believe was a factor in us not being able to recover as quickly as we could have, because that was a large increase of taxes from the energy producers' perspective, and that money could have been reinvested. So we're very blessed. We make a lot of money through the energy industry. Our state does, and we're giving tax breaks, tax benefits to a lot of our citizens, but we also want to make sure that we're taking care of the people that are feeding us, the energy companies.
Mm-hmm. Finance and Taxation Committee. What have you done on that committee? And tell us some key bills that have come out of that committee or still need to come through.
I think that's one of the best committees there is. Chairman Hedlund is a phenomenal chairman, a great leader, and a great mentor. A lot of the bills that are going through are geared at. Let me rephrase this.
Go ahead.
When you have an excess of revenue, like we do,
which we do, right?
It's a blessing, but it's also a challenge. And the challenge is exactly when when you have a lot of excess, there are a lot of groups that want to have a tax break. A lot of special interests that want to have a tax break for their particular interests, and a lot of them are very good. A lot of them have very good cases to make with it. But when you do that, when you nickel and dime, you're taking away the total amount that's available to give a tax break to the largest group of people. So part of the challenge is it's easy to say yes, but it's hard to say no. With the overall goal of wanting to give the most tax relief to the most people, the challenge has been wading through a lot of these special interest requests, and big focus has been on tax relief, whether it be income tax, property tax, or a combination. And at this point in the conference committees, it's probably going to end up being some sort of a combination. I believe that the best way to give a tax break is not to take it in the first place. Other types of taxes are going to be redistributing it from another source, but like I said, it's going to be some sort of a combination in the end.
But we will see there will be some form of tax relief, property income, other things.
Yeah, probably. I mean, still looking in the crystal ball, but yeah, probably some combination of income tax relief, property tax buy down, mill buy down of some sort, and probably some sort of a homestead credit. So those seem to be the three tiers that's kind of making its way through the conference.
What's a homestead credit for the layperson?
So a homestead credit is basically where you live. If you're at and the way we're doing based on age, you would get a tax credit on the property that you reside in, your main residence.
Okay. Here's a question I have, and I've heard people chit-chat about this. If the state has this much money, what would be the opposition to providing like a tax rebate, or everybody getting a check for $1,000 or something like that? Has that been kicked around? And it sounds like you're probably not in favor of that, and the legislature's not going to do that. But I'm just throwing that out there. What would be the opposition or problem with that?
I think it's trying to figure out the best, the way you get the most effect for the most people. Having a tax break or a tax incentive like that for some people that won't have an income tax, it might not mean anything, because you're taking a tax break of someone who doesn't have an income tax to begin with. There's certainly arguments for it, but like I said, it's when you're trying to when you're trying to cut the pie, there's only if you cut the pieces too small, then those pieces become less and less significant. So
what are those hearings like, Jeremy, when people come before the hearings? A lot of people lobbying for tax breaks, lobbying for this or that. Tell me about those, and those must be pretty interesting and to wade through it all.
Yeah, they're very interesting, and a lot of times they're quite emotional. When you get certain, like I said, you get certain special interest groups, and they have very good points. They have very good stories to bring, and some of them we agreed with. Hey, these are things that are going to help. This will help attract bioscience in North Dakota. This is where this will bring business in. This will bring workers in. Those are things that are going to help. Other ones, while they're good, they're not. They don't do a lot for the most amount of people. So those are the ones that we have to be very cautious of. Like I said, it's when you have a lot of money, it's easy. It's hard to say no when you have a lot of money, but at the same time, you got to realize that we still got to live within a budget. We still got to live within our means.
What's the Western Area Water Supply? I know that's something that you work with and near and dear to your heart.
Yes, the Western Area Water Supply came about in early 2010s. Part of the boom. We're an area with farms and ranches and not a lot else. Everybody was on their own wells and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden you get this huge influx of people, industry, commercial, oil and gas, and one of the biggest resources that need is water. So putting the Western Area Water Supply in was a very monumental task that had to happen in a short amount of time. And so what happened is, I believe back in the 2011 session, it was created, and the infrastructure was able to get funded to lay the pipes, get the water, get the infrastructure going, and it's been going ever since. So it's been a project that has been absolutely needed. There would be the Bakken would not look like it is today without that. But at the same time, it's something that took a lot of money to do, because we needed it fast. And we're at the point now where it's struggling financially, and we're trying to get it on par with different area water supplies in the state to get the right cost share with the state in it. And that's what we're trying to do with the Western Area Water Supply now.
And will that be taken care of in these last couple weeks of the session?
Hopefully,
Is that your hopeful goal?
It absolutely should. Yes, I believe we're working on it now. I just came from a meeting on that, and we're trying to work out the details on that for the financing of that. Hopefully, it'll come to a good conclusion early next week.
Workforce development, that was a big hot topic at the start of this session. I live in Fargo, and there are restaurants that close every week. Taco Bell, whatever, if they don't have enough workers. That's the kind of this holdover from COVID is shortage of workers and things like that, and getting workers to the state. What has been done, if anything, for workforce development that you think can help with some of these issues?
Workforce development is huge. Whether you are, and I would also add into it childcare, because I think they're very closely related and very interrelated. Having the ability to have childcare will allow more workforce, but the workforce development is huge. Having different programs, trying to recruit, retain, and in different areas, grow our own. Such in Watford City, there's different programs to have trade schools, have trade associations, even within the high school part, trying to get young high schoolers, young adults into different trades early on, to keep them in our area, to keep them working versus moving out of state like I did. Recruiting from out of states, and we're also, you might have heard the former Lieutenant Governor Sanford. He's in charge of a task force now trying to recruit foreign skilled workers, particularly from the Ukraine, to help in the oil and gas industry. We can't look in a traditional,
outside the state. Yeah, absolutely.
We have tens of thousands of open jobs, and we got to be creative in how we fill them. We would have more drilling rigs right now if we had more workers. We'd have more frac crews if we had more workers. The choke point is workforce.
And the child care conundrum, what's been done about that, or is something going to be done about that, or is it kind of up to local entities to handle that themselves? And tell me about that.
Yeah, child care is, whether you're a Democrat, whether a Republican, whether you're a big city or a small town, child care is absolutely an area that is crossing all lines. Is important to every facet of business. And like I said, workforce development is a huge part of it. If you have a parent that has to stay home with a child, you're taking a potential worker out of the workforce. If that child has a child care option, that other parent has the opportunity, if they want, to go into the workforce. So they're quite interrelated. I believe a lot of it has to be. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I don't think there's a cookie cutter. I think the private public partnerships work very well. Helping to fund, state helping to fund local groups or local entities to figure out their own ways of doing it. For example, Wolf Pup Daycare in Watford City. I've had representatives from the eastern side of the state use that as a kind of an example of how it was done right, of public-private partnerships and putting something like that together. So I think the locals, this county, the city, have the best ideas because they know their areas. What they'll need help with is the funding on some of that. So having the funds, but letting the locals figure out how to do it is probably the best way.
Term limits. So the voters voted for term limits.
Yes.
But it looks like the legislature isn't in agreement with that. How did you vote on that, and how do you tell someone who voted for term limits that the legislature is not going to go along with that, it looks like?
Well, the term limits bill ended up failing in the Senate.
Right.
the bill that went through the House basically extended 12 years, but it also included different executive staffs,
Okay.
Executive positions in the state. I voted for it, and I thought it would be good to bring that to bring that to the voting
Kind of a
state.
compromise is what you voted.
A compromise, yeah, I think so. But my thoughts is, I've got for me, I only have 6 years in the House because I'm doing an unexpired 2-year term, but potentially. But the
Do you like the set? You're going to run again, I assume.
I like it.
Okay,
I like what I'm
Okay.
doing. I really do. I am having fun.
But finish up your term limit thought too. Sorry,
But yes,
I interrupted
with
you.
the term limits, the challenge is we meet up to 80 days, 2 times a year. There's not a whole lot of time to build experience. You've got some people that have been in there for quite a while. It takes 3 or 4 terms, from what I'm hearing, to get competent, to get good at a subject matter, to be in a position where you could become a chair or vice chair, or be in a good leadership position, having built up a lot of tribal knowledge. If you're only going to be there a total of 4 sessions, by the time you're getting that knowledge, you're out. So one thing's going to have to happen pretty quickly. You're going to have to start growing your leadership really, really early. But the way I see it is, I was fortunate. I got a lot of mentorship. I got a lot of guidance before I started and when I'm here. Who's going to be the old man on the mountain when the most experienced person has only been there, 3 or 4 terms already, 3 or 4 sessions. So you're going to lose a lot. You're going to lose a lot of knowledge, and I think it creates opportunities for less control in the legislature and more control, maybe with the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. So that could be a challenge in the future, not having a background knowledge of how it works.
Got about 4 minutes left in the show here. Governor Burgum has started to veto some bills. Some have been overridden, some have not. What are your thoughts on a couple of these, like the 80-mile-per-hour bill, the pronoun bill, the so-called pronoun bill in school, and then also the ranked choice voting, which affects Fargo, which could be headed toward a court challenge, I think. Just some thoughts on those and how you voted.
Well, the function of the governor, that is one of the functions of the government, is he has the opportunity to veto. Government is not meant to be efficient. It's meant to be slow. It's meant to be very inefficient, and that's a good thing, because imagine if you had one side, one group that could go through and make so many changes so fast. What would we have? Having things move slow is usually a good thing. Regarding the vetoes, I wasn't present for the pronoun one, so I wasn't able to vote on that one. I was out. The 80-mile-an-hour bill, I voted that way too.
For the bill.
For the bill.
Okay. And then the ranked choice
the
voting
ranked choice
for Fargo?
voting,
Yeah.
I voted to override. I voted on the override as well as that one.
Okay.
There's some things that, there's some things in our wheelhouse that I think that was, probably, best left to the legislature, and the other ones I could see where the governor might have his priorities. But again, that's where it comes back to us to override. That's just the way that our Constitution is action and reaction. It's a large chess game.
Devil's advocate question as we wrap up and get close here. Not everybody is in favor or wild about everything that happens in the legislature. There's been some editorials written about that the legislature isn't forward-thinking, is anti-LGBT rights, things like this. Well, how do you react to that or things like that?
Honestly, I didn't come to Bismarck for that. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. That's why I'm on finance and tax. That's why I'm on energy and natural resources. I'm looking at the mechanics. I'm looking at, how are we going to fund our government? How are we going to make sure Western North Dakota is taken care of? The social issues, I'm a Republican. I'm very conservative. But But I think some of these issues tend to be a distraction in the larger picture of trying to run a state government, and they take a lot of time. They take a lot of energy, and while some of them are some of them are needed, some of them are I believe can be distractions.
About a minute and a half left. What are the key things you need to see get done here in the last couple weeks on your committees?
Biggest thing is going to be what's the tax break's going to look like. What's the final version of that? For me and for my area, Western Area Water Supply, and then those are the two big ones. And then not so much in my committee, but the PURG retirement. How's that gonna settle out? Because that's going to affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And those are it's going to come down to just the last few big items, and that's just where the negotiations and the conference committees and the leadership meetings are going to happen, and all those details are going to get hammered out.
And you're involved in some of these conference committees?
I'm involved in the Western Area Water Supply
that one.
one.
Okay.
That's the only one I'm involved with as far as the big ones, near and dear to my heart. Yep. The other ones, that's higher math. That's stuff for the higher leaders. They're hammering those out.
Last question, about 30 seconds left. Dave always asks this of every guest he has. When do you think this is going to end?
I have
What's
no
the
idea.
final day?
I have
April
no idea.
20-something?
Hopefully the last week of April, because the first week of May I have to head down to my daughter's college graduation. So hopefully it gets done before that.
Okay. Jeremy Olson, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Jeremy Olson, Republican representative from Arnegard, North Dakota. I'm Matt O'Lean for North Dakota Legislative Review. Thanks for watching.